everybody, and welcome to Module 3, Lesson 3 of Go Math. Today we are looking at comparing and ordering rational numbers. Our essential question for the day is, how do you compare and order rational numbers? And first we're going to be taking a look at equivalent fractions and decimals. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to draw our number line. Everything here is going to be positive on this number line. So I'm actually going to put my 0 way over here because I'm going to have many numbers on my positive side. I'm going to put my 1 over here. And so we're going to be looking at a bunch of fractions and decimals in between 0 and 1. And first we're going to start with tenths. So in a separate color, we are going to write out 1/10 all the way through 9/10. So I'm going to draw 10 small lines using my black pen. Okay. And now using a different color pen, I'm going to label them. So my first one is 1/10. Then I have 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 8/10, 9/10, and then my 1 is 10/10. Remember, anytime we have the numerator and the denominator the same, that gives us 1. So all of these tenths are in between 0 and 1. Now when you're looking at all of these fractions written in tenths, I hope you are thinking about reducing them. So for example, and now we're going to take out another color, so I'm going to use blue for this one. We could reduce 2/10 down to 1/5. We could reduce 4/10 down to 2/5. 5/10 we could reduce down to 1/2. 6/10 we could reduce down to 3/5. 8/10 we could reduce down to 4/5. And 9/10 will stay the same. 10/10 reduces down to 1. Now let's go ahead and write out our decimals, and then we'll talk about some benchmark decimals to keep in mind. So in another color, I'm going to go ahead and write my decimals. So 1/10, 0.1, 2/10, 0.2, and notice how I'm going on with these tenths. So that is our tenths written as decimals. Now something to also think about here is, what if I have a decimal that falls in between one of these other decimals? Like for example, we would have 1/4. And I'm going to make a red line right there. So 1/4 is the decimal 0.25, which gives us the fraction 25/100. If we reduce that 25/100 down, we would get 1/4. Okay, same thing on the other side when we're talking about 75/100ths. So that's going to be right here in between 7/10 and 8/10. So I'm going to add that in. As a fraction, that would be 75/100, which reduces down to 3/4. So keeping that in mind as we work through our lesson today, so we filled out our decimals on the top and some fractions on the bottom with our reduced fractions as well. So something to think about is those benchmark decimals. And these are our quarters. So like 0.25 is the same thing as 1/4 because it is 25/100. So if you think in terms of money, you could have 25 cents is 1 and $1 is 4 quarters. That's how I got 1/4 if you're thinking in terms of money. Another benchmark decimal would be okay, 50/100, which would reduce to 1/2. Maybe you saw 5/10 first and then you went to 1/2. That's fine also. Then we have 75 hundredths. This can be looked at as 3 quarters because we had 75/100 and reduced it down. If it helps you, think of money and go ahead and add that as a tip on the side. Now we're going to talk about converting fractions to decimals and converting decimals to fractions. So first, we are going to take a look at this one. 1 7/10. We are going to convert from fraction to decimal. Okay, so we are going to take our 1 whole, and that goes in front of the decimal point, and then we have 7/10. So even though we've written this as a decimal, we still read it mathematically by saying 1 7/10. Okay? What if I gave you this decimal? Could you tell me that as a fraction? If I gave you this decimal, if you read it mathematically, that would be 3/10. So you could put 3/10 as your answer. Now try this one. And if you need to, you can go ahead and look up here at our chart from earlier, and you could find 2/10 and see what it reduced down to, 1/5. So let's write that down for the answer. 2/10 reduced to 1/5. What if you had a problem like this? 1 25 hundredths, how could you write that as a fraction? You would have 1 as your whole number because it's in front of the decimal, and then 25/100. But wait, 25/100 could be reduced to 1 1/4. Let's try this decimal. We have 35 hundredths. Can you write it as a fraction in its most reduced form? First, let's start with the obvious, 35/100. Now I can reduce that down by 5, dividing by 5 in my numerator and my denominator, and I'm left with 7/20. A tip for you is to always write your answer in the most reduced form, and that way you will always make sure that you get the answer right on a test or on a quiz. Next, we're going to discuss ordering fractions. We're still on Module 3, Lesson 3. It's just continued, so make sure to label the top of your paper. Right now we're going to discuss ordering fractions with a like denominator. So here are the 3 fractions that we have. 8/20, 4/20, and 1/20. And we need to go least to greatest. So because all of these numbers have the same denominator, I can just look straight at the numerator. So step 1 is to check for common denominator. If the common denominator is the same, then check the numerator. Okay, so in this situation, they're all 20. So next, I'm just going to order the numbers on the top. So least to greatest, I would have 1 over 20 first. Next, I would have 4 over 20. And last, I would have 8 over 20. And that is my answer. Because they all had the same denominator, I'm just checking my numerator and then I'm ordering them. Now, what if you had a mix? What if you had some fractions and some decimals to deal with? What might you do then? Let's take a look at this next example. We're still ordering from least to greatest, except for this time we have 85 hundredths, we have 3/5, we have 15 hundredths, and 7 over 10. So first you can decide if you want to convert them to all fractions or all decimals. Then step 2, you will put them in order least to greatest. So for the purpose of this, I'm going to convert them all to decimals. So the first decimal that I have is 85 hundredths. The next one I have to deal with is 3/5. When I go ahead and I convert this to a decimal, I use division. How many times does 5 go into 3? And 5 doesn't go into 3, so I'm going to put my 0 up top and add my 0 here. Now, how many times does 5 go into 30? Hopefully you said 6 times. And that leaves you with, you can put 0.60 or you can leave it at just 6/10. Either way, it will be the same thing in its fully reduced form. Next, we have 15 hundredths, and the last one we need to deal with is 7/10. So how many times does 10 go into 7? Well, it doesn't, so we're going to add our zeros. Now, how many times does 10 go into 70? Okay, so we have, and the reason why I added that extra 0 here is just because I would have the same number of factors after the decimal. Okay, see how we did that? So now I need to order them from least to greatest. So here I go. The smallest one is going to be 15 hundredths. Then I have 60 hundredths. Then I have 70 hundredths. And then I have 85 hundredths. So now that I've converted them and I've written them all down in least to greatest form, I need to go back up to my original problem and write them least to greatest in the same way my original problem was asking me. So I'm going to have my 15 hundredths will stay the same. 60 hundredths, that was actually 3/5. So that's going to be my next one. Then my 7/10, we actually converted that over, so I'm going to bring 7/10 down. And last, I had my 85 hundredths as a decimal. And there's my answer. I ordered fractions and decimals in least to greatest order. Thanks for watching. This was Module 3.3, Comparing and Ordering Rational Numbers.